sitting across the continents, we are connected, and we are able to hear Professor Misra sir's lecture. He's giving his lecture from US. I would like to request Kazi to introduce Professor Misra and welcome everyone. Thank you so much. Over to you, Kazi. Kazi, please unmute.
Hello.
Yes, now you can go.
Good evening, everyone. A very warm welcome to everyone who has joined us this evening for this lecture. We are extremely excited and delighted to welcome you to this another distinguished guest lecture, which is titled Weaving Indigenous Knowledge into the SDG Narrative, Whispers from the Field by Professor Kamal K. Misra. Before we start, I would like to take a moment to introduce Anthropos India Foundation and our founder, Dr. Sunita Reddy ma'am. Founded in 2011, Anthropos India Foundation promotes the discipline of anthropology, its philosophy, and its methods to engage in applied and action research. Our work seeks to address issues of local communities through a bottom-up approach unique to their cultures and people. We conduct community-based research rooted in local knowledge systems, local culture, and ecology to inform policy initiatives and drive transformational impact. AIF also conducts workshops, trainings, and advocacy on various issues, especially on children. AIF promotes visual anthropology through vibrant, authentic, meaningful ethnographic films and photo documentation. We also publish a quarterly multilingual digital magazine, Childhood Matters, and monthly magazine, Anthro Bulletin, along with our publishing house called Anthropos Books. So as our founder, Dr. Sunita Reddy ma'am, she is an associate professor at the Center of Social Medicine and Community Health at JNU. Now, I would like to take a moment to formally introduce our guest speaker for this lecture, Professor Kamal K. Misra. Professor Kamal K. Misra is an eminent Indian anthropologist with over 4 decades of distinguished academic research and administrative experience. He currently holds the position of Professor Emeritus of Anthropology at Kalinga Institute of Social Sciences, Bhubaneswar. He formerly served as Vice-Chancellor of Utkal University of Culture and was the Dean of School of Social Sciences, University of Hyderabad. He has also held several other prominent positions, including Director of the Anthropological Survey of India, Kolkata, and Director of Indira Gandhi Rashtriya Manav Sangrahalaya, Bhopal. Professor Misra has made significant contribution to cultural and social anthropology with a deep focus on ecological anthropology, linguistic anthropology, and anthropological theory and museum anthropology. He has authored and edited 27 impactful books and more than 75 research papers. He has also been involved with national level policymaking, serving on the High Level Committee on Scheduled Tribes of India. In addition to his administrative leadership, Professor Misra has held academic positions in prestigious institutions in India and abroad, including Austin College in Texas, USA, University of Bergen, Norway. He is a life member of many anthropological associations in India and abroad, including our Anthropos India Foundation. And now, sir, with your permission, we would like to record this lecture and over to you, Mr. Sir.
Sure. Good evening to all of you. I hope I'm audible.
Yes,
and
sir.
also visible.
Yes, sir.
Fine. First of all, I would like to profusely thank Professor Sunita Reddy, the chairperson and the founder of Anthropos India Foundation. She is doing a marvelous job in putting all of us together on one platform. So I'm really grateful to her. And also I'm grateful to the entire AIF team who is after this endeavor, a noble endeavor, I would say. And I was really delighted when the offer came from Anthropos India Foundation and its founder, Professor Sunita Reddy, to deliver a lecture. I agreed to it, and I thought that I should do something, or I should speak something on indigenous knowledge, particularly in the perspective of the sustainable development goal narratives, which has become very lively topic of discussion today. I was also motivated by another factor that recently many of you may not be knowing, that Professor Sunita Reddy, along with others, had edited 2 volumes on indigenous knowledge of the PVTGs in India. I think I'm correct. And
with Professor Ota.
both the volumes have been released, and I think those who are interested probably can have a look at that. Friends, before I start, I would make a kind of clarification that in this presentation, I'm making use of 2 concepts. One is in indigenous knowledge, and the other one is sustainable development, as you can see from the title. And of course, Whispers from the Field is a kind of reminder to all the anthropologists, those who are the field persons. So therefore, there are some feedback from the field, obviously, but then 2 very impactful concepts I have been using, and oft debated concepts. One is indigenous knowledge, and the other one is sustainable development. I would like to clarify at this point that indigenous knowledge, although there is a lot of literature on indigenous knowledge, but then very simply, I would say that this is something called local knowledge. If I would be given an opportunity, I would have called it local knowledge. But I know that I'm speaking to an international audience, and therefore I'm using a phrase which is much more used internationally, and therefore I'm using indigenous knowledge. So indigenous knowledge is nothing but the local knowledge, which are mostly in the oral form, not much in the written form, and it passes on from generation to generation. I call it a local wisdom or an indigenous wisdom. And if I may call it also indigenous science. So therefore, this is how I understand indigenous knowledge. And therefore, it has got, many people have given a lowly place to indigenous knowledge compared to scientific knowledge. I'm using another concept called sustainable development. Sustainable development only came after the 1987 United Nations Conference on Environment and Development. And there was a Brundtland Commission which was constituted, and a report came. The title of the report, or in the book form, it was called Our Common Future. And for the first time in the post-1987 period, in the 1990s, sustainable development became a catchword among the academics. So this means that whatever we are doing for our development, we should do something we should leave something for the posterity, for the future generation. This is how we have tried to understand sustainable development. And of course, when I'm talking about Sustainable Development Goals, SDG stands for Sustainable Development Goals. This is a United Nations agenda, which I shall discuss in the next slide. Now, what is sustainable development? What is the vision behind sustainable development? I will not take much time because time is very limited, and many of you may be knowing about it. It is only for the students, those who are starting work on sustainable development. This is an agenda for peace and prosperity for people and the planet now and into the future in a global partnership. So this is a United Nations agenda. It was adopted way back in 2015 by 193 member states of the United Nations. And this was for devising the means for the peace and prosperity of the whole world, as well as our planet on which we exist. The vision was to end poverty and other deprivations by 2030 with strategies that improve health and education, reduce inequality, spur economic growth, all while tackling climate change and working to preserve our oceans and forests. In the next slide, I will come to the details of these 17 development goals. There are 17 sustainable development goals, which I'll discuss in the next slide. And sustainable development goals recognize that action in one area will affect outcomes in others, and that development must balance all these things with environment and sustainability, social, economic, and environmental sustainability. Countries like our own have committed to prioritize progress for those who are furthest behind, such as the marginalized sections of the society, the tribal sections of the society, and therefore anthropologists have a larger role to play in the implementation or in the successful implementation of the sustainable development goals. Many of us in the committees which are meant for sustainable development goals in India, and we have noticed that it is a lot of money has been spent, a lot of work has been done, but then there are some problems which we shall discuss in one of my presentations. What are the 17 sustainable development goals? The sustainable development goals, as we can see, number one is to end poverty. Second one is to end hunger. Third one is good health and well-being. Fourth one is education. Fifth one is gender equality. Sixth one is clean water and sanitation. Seventh one is, as we can see, clean energy. And eighth one is decent work and economic growth. Ninth one is industrial growth and infrastructure. 10th one is reducing inequalities, all kinds of inequalities. 11th is sustainable cities and communities. 12th one is, responsible consumption and production. 13th one is climate action. 14th one is life below water. 15th one is life on land. 16th one is peace, justice, and strong institutions. And 17th, the last one, is partnership for the goals. So they are all interconnected, and this partnership means two things. Number one is partnership between the nations, and also partnership among these objectives. So therefore, there is some kind of, comprehensive plan. Now, the Sustainable Development Goals are the blueprint to achieve a better and more sustainable future for everybody, for all of us. They address the global challenges we face, including those related to poverty, inequality, climate change, environmental degradation, peace, and justice. The 17 goals are all interconnected, as I told you, and in order to leave no one behind, it is important that we achieve them all by 2030. This is the kind of target that is earmarked by the United Nations. Now, it includes 169 specific targets and over 230 measurable indicators. So this is the vision behind Sustainable Development Goals, and all these things are available on the United Nations website. Now, after it was adopted in 2015, it started, countries or the nations started working on them since the first part of 2016. If we count from today, 8 to 9 years have elapsed in between, and this is the time for progress. And I have looked at some of the recent studies on the progress of the Sustainable Development Goals today. First of all, I'll go to the report by the United Nations itself last year, 2024. This is called the Sustainable Development Goals Report by the United Nations. In one small sentence, I can summarize the entire report. It says that, quote unquote, a promise in peril. This is a promise in peril. And this, indicates where we stand as far as the Sustainable Development Goals and their implementations are concerned. I would quote from the introduction of the report. It says that the Sustainable Development Goals report reveals that the progress has ground to a halt. It has ground to a halt. I'm emphasizing this, or been reversed across multiple fronts despite reaffirmed pledges. So therefore, there is not a much success story behind the implementation during all these 9 or 10 years. This is a quotation from the report itself, from the introduction of the report itself. I would like to draw your attention to another report, same organization, United Nations, but a different wing, called the Department of Social and Economic Affairs. Last year, 2024, this has also come out with a report, and only one sentence will suffice to summarize the whole report. And I quote, with less than 1/5 of targets on track, less than 1/5 of the targets on track, world is failing to deliver on promise of the Sustainable Development Goals, unquote. This also speaks very loudly about the outcomes of Sustainable Development Goals, despite billions of dollars have been spent on development agendas. Then I will come to an independent institute. This is not a part of the United Nations. This is an independent institute located in Manitoba in Canada. In 2024, this institute, by name International Institute of Sustainable Development, has come out with another report. And again, one sentence I should quote from this report. It says, I quote, the long story short of SDG progress is that only 17% of the targets are on track. Only 17% are on track toward their 2030 deadline. Progress is moderate or minimal. This is very, very significant. Either the progress is moderate or minimal on close to half of the targets, and more than third are either stalled or regressing, unquote. So this is the story of development or progress of Sustainable Development Goals. Now, I shall come to another report, which was, there was a committee constituted by United Nations, taking leading academics and experts in the field of development. They have come out with a report, and the part of the report was published in the reputed journal called Nature. In 2023, the part of the report had come, and only a small extract will do what was the theme of the report. I quote from this report that out of a sample of 36 SDG targets, Sustainable Development Goals targets, only 2 are on track, unquote. By very famous academics, very famous policy planners. They were on this committee. It was constituted by the United Nations itself. And the report itself says that out of 36, only 2 are on track. So this is the kind of situation. Again, I will come to the review of the Sustainable Development Goals Summit that was held in New York on September 18 and 19, 2023. It also says the same thing, reaffirms the same thing. And it says a mere 12% of the Sustainable Development Goals are currently on track. It is in a state of, I quote, stagnation. I have underlined it. It is in a state of stagnation in the face of multiple crises, unquote. So this is the whole situation of the progress of Sustainable Development Goals. What does it indicate? It indicates that there is some kind of bottleneck somewhere, and therefore the progress has not been achieved. One of the reasons, as an anthropologist, I see is the misconceptualization of the people's, understanding of the concept of development. Anthropologists have been debating. We are teaching in many of the universities, we are teaching a course called Anthropology of Development. all development anthropology in whatever name, but then we are teaching something relating to development, and particularly the development of the marginalized poor societies of the world. Now, there are so many works on this. Literature is probably too much to review here, but then those who are familiar with me and with whom I have at one point of time worked, I am only taking their names. Anthropologists like Otto Escobar. Escobar's book, Encountering Development, is very popular. I'll come in the next slide about that. In 1995, he is a Colombian American anthropologist who is teaching very close to where I'm staying. He is in the North Carolina. Then Tanya Lee, a leading anthropologist from Canada. Then Fikret Barks, a Turkish American professor, and he is an environmentalist also with a specialization in marine ecology. Our own Ashish Kothari, who is of the Kalpavriksha fame in Pune. David Mose, professor of anthropology from the School of Oriental and African Studies. I am exposed to some of his literature. They have been pointing out the failure of many development projects, including sustainable development goals, are due to the following reasons. Some of these are some of the list is not complete. It is only an indicative list. And many of them have pointed out that all this development planning actually follow one approach. And this approach is one size fits all approach. That means there is a single approach, and there are many stories about it, but then probably time will not permit me to explain all this, my own experiences about this. But then just a small kind of approach, a small kind of story I should like to narrate. When I was working in Arunachal Pradesh, the government of India decided that the people should be given milch cattle so that they will be independent as far as the economy is concerned. And this is also to empower the women, those who take care of their cattle. And then I was working in Arunachal those days for my doctoral work. There was a veterinary assistant surgeon who was a close friend of mine. We became friends there, obviously. And then he was sent to get some cattle with their, a milch cattle, a kind of unit, a few units to distribute among the local people, a cow, a calf, and then some money for their maintenance. It came in the month of November, and then the poor veterinary assistant surgeon was given the responsibility. He went all the way to the district headquarters and then hired a truck, got a few units of cow and calf, and then distributed among the people and told them that this is how you have to do. Take the milk and then you sell it for your own good. It was November, but when December came, it was the Christmas time in Arunachal Pradesh, and many of the people where it was distributed, they were Christians. When the Christmas was approaching, then everything was taken care of. At the end of the month, in the January, the government asked the veterinary assistant surgeon to take a stock of the units that were distributed to the people. To his surprise, he found that out of 10 that he distributed, only 1 unit exists and 9 are no more existing. Then he asked the people what happened to the cow and the calf. Somebody said tiger has eaten away. Somebody said that went to the forest and never returned, and so on and so forth. The story is like this, that during the Christmas time, it was a very good source of beef for the people for celebration. So somebody decides something in Delhi or somewhere in New York, and this kind of imposition from above is on the people, and that really doesn't work. It did not work in this case also. So that is how anthropologists have been time and again pointing out that this one size fits all approach is really not very suitable for any kind of development, and particularly the kind of marginalized societies that we are talking about. And often anthropologists talk about cultural context. we never take into account the cultural context, and the example is also probably indicates about the cultural context, the religion of the people, the food habit of the people, and so on and so forth. Then development policies always or most of the times ignore the power dynamics within the community, between the communities, inside the nation, or intranational power dynamics and international power dynamics, and so on. Social structures are mostly oversimplified, and with an kind of premise that the people will accept whatever things are given to them. Then most of these development programs are focused on economic growth. What is the outcome in terms of, let us say, GDP, in terms of the buying or the purchasing capacity of the people, and so on. And last but not the least, anthropologists have always been pointing out about the inadequate engagement with indigenous knowledge. That is why I thought that I should focus more on this, although all other factors are equally important. And people's knowledge, people's perception, and practical insight about quote unquote development are often ignored in sustainable development goals planning and implementation. So this is the kind of bottleneck that might have caused, and there are other things as well. From an anthropological point of view, I thought that these things are very important for, if there is a failure, if it is not successful, probably these could be some of the factors. Now, coming to the very specifics, Escobar, as I said, had written a book in 1995 called Encountering Development. We have been using this book for teaching and learning. And if I summarize the entire book, it promotes post-development thinking and advocates for alternative, localized development models rooted in cultural contexts and indigenous worldviews. And sustainable development goals should take into account these kinds of alternative, localized development models instead of a globalized model or a Western paradigm for development of different varieties of people in different countries and continents. I have worked with Roy Allen. In fact, he was my mentor at the University of Kent and Canterbury. We have collaborated in many projects. He had come to Hyderabad on my request to deliver a keynote address. My students at Hyderabad might remember. And then he had written many books, and one of the edited volumes of Roy was Indigenous Environmental Knowledge and its Transformations. And most of the papers in this knowledge, or most of the chapters in this knowledge, talk about how development agencies often misunderstand or misuse indigenous knowledge, either tokenizing it or instrumentalizing it without proper engagement. Paul Silito, another colleague from the University of Sussex, Center for Development Studies and Anthropology, and he had written a book. He's a specialist on Bangladesh, Indigenous Knowledge Development in Bangladesh, Present and Future. Here, Paul also advocates integrating indigenous knowledge with scientific knowledge for more effective, culturally grounded development. Even I have a couple of papers and books, to advocating integration of scientific and environmental knowledge. I hold the position that they might be established on different kinds of frameworks, but then philosophical frameworks, but then there is a need for a complementarity of scientific knowledge with indigenous knowledge. Either of them is incomplete without the other. Another Canadian anthropologist, Tanya Lee, had written a book, The Will to Improve Governmentality, Development, and the Practice of Politics. And she says, to render a population governable, development practitioners must identify deficiencies that can be corrected through technical intervention. Again, here comes the coordination between scientific knowledge and indigenous knowledge. This positioning obscures the knowledge and agency of local people. This is a quotation from this book. My own guru, Professor L.K. Mahapatra, his book I showed you in the previous slide, tribal development in India, myth and reality. Always he says that development cannot be at the cost of human dignity. When it displaces, alienates, and marginalizes people, especially tribals, it ceases to be development. It becomes destruction. So this is how many anthropologists have talked about the problem of development. And of course, when it is misunderstood, the outcome will not be very encouraging. And that is what is happening in case of the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, what I feel is that there is a need for connecting indigenous knowledge with the Sustainable Development Goal narratives. What are the bottlenecks in integrating indigenous knowledge with Sustainable Development Goals? Some misconceptions need to be clear at this stage. Number one, indigenous, quote unquote, should not be understood in a narrative of progress or modernity. People think indigenous means backward. And that is the problem with many of the policy planners, many of our the stalwarts, those who are championing development projects. In fact, contrary to the popular belief, we know that indigenous knowledge is embedded in the life situation of the people and culture and directs them towards their development. I remember Professor Jogendra Singh, when I was a student in JNU, he was teaching a social change. And in his book also, Modernization of Indian Tradition, he talks about two kinds of changes. One is exogenous and the other one is endogenous. Some change which comes from inside, from within. And that is always neglected and that is always misunderstood. And this is the problem. Also in indigenous, people are, they do not give much emphasis to the local knowledge, thinking that, oh, probably these are very unscientific. Second, indigenous knowledge changes, constantly producing and reproducing, reinventing and losing with time and generations of people, replenishing the agendas of their development. This is another misconception that indigenous knowledge is static. No, never. It is not static. It produces, it reproduces, it reinvents, depending on the context, depending on the situation, depending on the generation. So therefore, it always is replenished by new kind of visions and new kind of ideas of adjusting with the nature. Nations, societies, and communities are far from being internally homogeneous and externally bounded objects, demanding a more flexible and context-specific development agenda. This kind of thing we don't find in the Sustainable Development Goals. Goals are fixed, targets are given, and people have to, money is spent, of course, billions of dollars are being spent, and people want, United Nations wants the final outcome. So this is a very inflexible, this is a very rigid kind of agenda, but then we as an anthropologist feel that a more flexible and context-specific agenda is required. Recognizing the richness of indigenous knowledge and integrating this knowledge with the development strategies rather than pushing the communities to conform to a national or international socio-economic benchmark. These are some of the problems in connecting indigenous knowledge with the Sustainable Development Goals narratives, and the result, as we see, after the lapse of 8 or 9 years of its implementation, we find that the results are not very encouraging. And probably, to my mind, and many of us think that these could be the reasons for it's not much visible progress. There is some progress, of course, but not visible progress. Now I shall come to a very specific but then very limited kind of field examples. Theory is different, but then when I come to the field, I find that Sustainable Development Goals are within the communities. People practice development, and therefore that needs to be recognized. Again, because of time constraint, there are thousands of examples, but then I have selected only a few, depending on my own experience as a field anthropologist or from the experience of or the publication of my colleagues, not only from anthropology, but from diverse backgrounds, like from biochemistry or biotechnology, not biochemistry, biotechnology or pharmacology, or from other kinds of related botany, and other kinds of related sciences. About ethnomedicine, SDG talks about good health and well-being. This is already there about ethnomedicine, and this field is overworked. Medical anthropologists, also the general anthropologists have been working on ethnomedicine. There are many journals which are run by botanists, like economic botany, where you find plenty of references on ethnobotany. I have picked up only one example, the Poroja. Poroja is a PVTG and predominantly live in the district of Koraput and the neighboring districts of Odisha. This is a small example of how Poroja handle ethnomedicine. Plants identified as medicines by the Poroja include a total of 66 species distributed in 66 genera belonging to 42 different families. And which families are more important as ethnomedicine? Euphorbiaceae, Asteraceae, Anacardiaceae, Amaranthinaceae, and these are very important families. And Porojas use different parts like fruits, roots, tubers, leaves, etc. for ethnomedicine of these 66 species. The ethnomedical plant species included 22 trees, 16 shrubs, 26 herbs, and 2 climbers or creepers. Various plant parts such as seed, fruit, root, tuber, leaf, etc. are used in the treatment of various diseases and their infections. This is based on a scientific paper published by 2 of our colleagues from botany in the year 2021. So I'm not really narrating stories. These are based on hard facts. I hope you are hearing me, Sunita.
Yes, sir.
Now I will come to the Sustainable Development Goal number 2. This is about food sustainability. I have got some experience about Sweden agriculture or the Podu agriculture. I have worked among the Juang, like many of my colleagues in Kendusar district of Odisha. I have found that as many as 35 crops are grown in a period of 2 years on a very small Podu plot or a Sweden plot of approximately 2 to 2.5 hectares, where cultivars are sown simultaneously in the month of April, around the month of April. What I mean to say is before the onset of the monsoon, while harvests are made over a long period of time. So this is the kind of multiple cropping. When I ask them why multiple cropping, the Swedeners say that farming is always nature dependent. Sometimes there is no rainfall or scanty rainfall. Sometimes there is winter frost. Sometimes there is pest attack. Sometimes there is crop damage by birds and wild animals. And therefore, mixed farming or multiple cropping is a kind of insurance against natural calamities. What I mean by saying this is that if one crop fails, probably the other crop will come up, and therefore there will not be a problem of food shortage for the family for the rest of the year. So Swedeners think, or the Podu farmers think, that this is an insurance against different kinds of natural calamities. Now, when I asked about multiple cropping to my friends, particularly, it was a very interesting conversation between me and Paul Silito. Paul Silito, I forgot to tell you that he is an anthropologist at the University of Sussex, but his original training was in agricultural science. He was an agronomist. He was a trained agronomist, left agricultural science, and then became interested in anthropology. So I have asked many of them, and including Paul, and they say that why multiple cropping? Good crop cover on the surface soil prevents losses of nutrients through runoff and leaching of water, leaves more room for late growing varieties. This helps recycling of biomass and nutrients through crop and weed residues. This also improves soil quality by surface mulching, and there are many other reasons. So therefore, multiple cropping is not really a disadvantage for a farmer. It is rather an advantage. And many of our, recent farmers have come to multiple cropping instead of unicropping that I have seen in Andhra Pradesh, particularly the paddy belt or the rice belt of Andhra Pradesh. After the failure of cotton, now they are going for multiple cropping. On the question of weeds, I asked my Swedener friends that why do you leave? By practice they leave, by convention they leave some weeds in the Podu plot. So I asked, why do you leave? They say, we have been doing it. About 20% of weeds we leave, as we have seen it from our forefathers. My father was doing this, my grandfather was doing this. This is a common reply that we get from the farmers, tribal farmers. But then when I asked my agronomist friend that is there any advantage of leaving the weeds, a part of the weeds in the field, they say yes, there is a lot of advantage. Weeds conserve soil nutrients by giving surface cover. So some amount of weeds must be, it is good for the field. It creates unfavorable environment to pest invasion and hence a blessing for the farmer. So therefore, the tribal farmer may not be knowing the scientific reason. It is a matter of convention for him. But then an agronomist says that what they are doing unknowingly is really very good as a scientific experiment. I shall come to again the food production by the tribals, by the indigenous groups about the mushrooms. I know a Similipal bioreserve, which is there in the Mayurbhanj district of Odisha. And there are many tribes, those who live inside this area and outside. About the 10 tribes like the Santal, the Kolha, the Munda, Khadia, Bhumis, Bhuya, Bathudi, Kudumi, Ho, Mankidias, and so on. They are mycophilic and have extensive traditional mycological knowledge. They know all about this, the mushrooms. In total, 14 species of fleshy mushrooms belong to 8 genera and 6 families are identified by phenotypic and microscopic characters. All these mushrooms are being used by the tribes as a source of food as well as ethnomedicinal purposes, including cure for malnutrition, weaknesses, and other nutritional disorders, etc. This also comes from my colleagues, those who have written extensively, botanists basically, on mushrooms. Therefore, what I want to emphasize here is that traditional knowledge exists among the people, but then among the indigenous communities, but then we are not trapping them and using them for their advantage. Anthropologists are very familiar with indigenous knowledge and its impact on a role in biodiversity conservation. That is Sustainable Development Goals number 13. And only one example I'm giving you. It is about the totem. We know that totem or the clan symbol is the identity marker and also for many social purposes used by the tribal and indigenous people. I have got a few clan names by one single tribal community by name the Santal. Hasda, from the title, from the surname, you can find. And then the totem on the other side of the column. Hasda, and their totem is wild goose. They never harm these totemic objects. And therefore, by default, they conserve these natural objects and add to the biodiversity conservation efforts. Murmu, antelopes, kisku, kingfisher, hembrom, beetle nut, marandi, grass or weed, soren, stars, tudu, owl is their totem. Baske, stale rice, then pauria, pigeon is their totem, and chondre, lizard is their totem. And similarly, in all tribal communities, all indigenous groups, you will find clans, and then by default, they preserve their totemic objects, and that contributes to the biodiversity conservation or Sustainable Development Goals number 13 that United Nations talks about. Another effort in this direction is the sacred groves. And now there are some data about the sacred groves with me. This is, of course, limited to Odisha. There are an estimated 2,166 sacred groves across the state of Odisha, concentrated largely in the tribal districts. And this was as per an estimate by two of our colleagues in the year 2020. The institution of sacred groves in the state is recognized by various names. Tribals have their own names for sacred groves. I have seen sacred groves all over this country. Probably the largest sacred grove I have come across in Meghalaya. And of course, they are there in Maharashtra, they are there in Kerala, They are there in Tamil Nadu and in almost all the states. Some of the deities to whom these groves are dedicated are the following. In Odisha, they are called Jhakeri or Gramsiri, Gosa Pennu, etc., etc. There are many deities, those who are supposed to be inside the sacred groves. A total of 42 plant species belonging to 39 genera under 26 families are recorded from 20 selected sacred groves of the Bhadrak district of Odisha. Out of the 30 districts, this is only one district. And in this district, there is a small sacred grove. My friend has studied in 2019 and published. And then he says that this is the variety of, plant life and animal life that exists inside the sacred grove. Moraceae represents the dominant family in this particular sacred grove. The respondents affirmed that the plants inside these sites are never cut or harmed. It is the story everywhere. When I'm presenting this, I remember one of my experiences. Once I was visiting Fakir Mohan University, which is on the outskirts of Baleswar, and the Vice-Chancellor was my friend that time. He himself was a very distinguished botanist. When I entered into the campus, by the side of the main gate, I found there was a grove. And then I asked him, VC Sahab, what is this? He said, this is a small forest where people come, local tribal people come once a year, they worship and then go away. Then I told him that, sir, this is a sacred grove and you need to preserve it. And he took it very seriously. Being a botanist, he took it very seriously. Then in the meantime, as it always happens, that his tenure was over and the matter ended there. One of our friends and colleagues taken over as the in-charge Vice-Chancellor after some time. And then I requested him, I told him that please go and see, there is a grove there and please protect it. He said, yes, but nothing happened. In my next visit, I found not a single tree was found because nobody realized the importance of the grove. Nobody realized the religiosity of the local tribal people or the spirituality of the local tribal people. And they cut it in the name of development, as it always happens. It was inside the campus of Fakir Mohan University for a long time. Unique biodiversity has been reflected in the groves as they harbor many medicinal plants, roots, fruit trees, and creepers and shrubs, along with many faunal types, including various resident birds, reptiles, and wild animals. I have seen this in Maharashtra and in other places. Now, in case of natural resource management, indigenous people have got tremendous knowledge, and these conform to the Sustainable Development Goals number 1, 2, 3, 13, 15, etc., etc. Traditional forest management contributes to the livelihood, water availability, biodiversity conservation, and food security of the people. And this is already, brought to our attention by different researchers. I will give only one example. May I request the organizers please ask me to stop if I exceed time. War Khasi, I'm giving the example of the War Khasi of South Meghalaya. They nurture forest in the vicinity of their habitations, near water sources, on the steep slopes and other ecologically sensitive lands. This particular community, like other communities, they have got tremendous indigenous knowledge based forest management practices. They still have village forest, group of village forest, clan forest, private forest, sacred forest, and then forest for commercial crops or the forest gardens. So people know what are these kinds of forest and how to protect and preserve them, how to make use of them. So they are very good managers as far as the forests are concerned. I shall give a very unique kind of example from the picture. On the right side, you can see this is the picture of an old lady from Arunachal Pradesh, from the Apatanis, and food production. This is a kind of rice fish culture of the Apatani, which conforms to the Sustainable Development Goals 1, 2, 3, and etc., etc. The Apatanis practice aquaculture along with rice farming on their plots simultaneously. Rice and fish culture in the valley is unique, is an unique practice in Arunachal, where 2 crops of rice and 1 crop of fish are raised together. Many films and documentaries have been also made on this. I myself have visited the field, and then I have seen that how beautifully they put these things together. Paddy cultivation as well as fish cultivation. Integrating aquaculture with agriculture assures higher productivity and year-round employment opportunities for farmers. Organic inputs are used in the plots utilized for rice cum fish culture. And what inputs are given? Poultry dropping, pig excreta, cow dung, waste of plants such as rice husks, ashes from the household stoves, and remains of burnt straws, decomposed straw, weeds, stalks, and so on and so forth. These are used, and chemical fertilizers are never used for this kind of enterprise. Then what I have noticed was strong bamboo bunds that prevent leakage of water and also prevent the escape of cultivated fish during the floods. Cultivation of millets on the bunds is a common practice. Bunds can also be utilized for cultivation of varieties of vegetables like cauliflower, cabbage, tomatoes, radish, pumpkin, cucumber, beans, brinjals, chilies, ginger, and so on and so forth. So therefore, this is a wonderful combination of, the practice of cultivation, the production practices, so that tribal people cannot be underestimated as far as their knowledge about sustainability is concerned. I shall come to ecotourism, which has become a very catchword. Some of our friends have worked on ecotourism, and I'm not going to the definition of ecotourism, that will waste time. I shall straight away come to the picture, as you see, for the tourists. And you must be, tempted to live in these kinds of cottages for some time, at least during weekends. I'm taking the example of Manas Wildlife Sanctuary in Assam, where we find one-horned rhinos. This is the place of habitation of Bodos. Local Bodos realized that in order to create change that was sustainable and impactful for both wildlife and the people, they had to center their efforts around this community. In the year 2003, local Bodos formed an ecotourism society that focused on getting the community invested and involved in the conservation of the land and its wildlife. And now it is, not only useful for biodiversity conservation of the local flora and fauna, but also it is helping the local people economically. It helps the travel industry. It helps the travelers for holidaying and so on and so forth. And this is not a unique example in Assam. In the states like Uttarakhand, Himachal Pradesh, Odisha, Kerala, they have succeeded in getting women and youth involved in ecotourism practices, which provides them with excellent socioeconomic benefits. So therefore, they are also very good in preservation, conservation, and tourism as well. I will come to the example of climate change. The Bonda women of Malkangiri, with whom I have got a first-hand, interaction, or I have worked among the Bondas, and climate change has, they're made Bonda women a different kind of women with wisdom, I would say. Sustainable Development Goals 1, 2, 3, 5, and so on and so forth. With the rising temperature, with the flash floods, heavy rainfall and landslides have impacted their agricultural produce. And that is a kind of common natural calamity for them. The advent of modern agricultural practices made Bondas shift from millet-centered mixed cropping system to paddy, which affected the availability of their staple food. But once they started using hybrid seeds, they found that these seeds cannot withstand weather extremities. I'm talking about the paddy cultivation. The traditional seeds were climate resilient and ensured nutritional safety. What were the traditional seeds? They were mostly the small millets. So Bonda women returned to millet farming in their dongar. They called their plots as dongars, or shifting cultivation plots. And most of them have abandoned paddy cultivation except the places where there is a possibility of assured water supply. That is the valley region. Otherwise, they have gone back to the farming of millet, small millet. They do not use any chemicals to protect the crops. Bonda women allow birds and insects to prey on other insects that can be harmful to the crops. They ensure that the seeds are sun-dried and preserved using organic means. This process involves protecting the seeds by covering them with neem leaves. So there are always indigenous technologies available for them for the preservation. The Banda women make sure to not cut fruits, fruit trees and medicinal plants from their dongar. This is not only true for Bonda, but also for other tribal communities. On those who are shifting cultivators, they never cut a fruit tree if they are found on their plot. So they retain the fruit tree and also the medicinal plants. Therefore, we cannot underestimate the traditional knowledge. Disaster risk reduction. I have got 3 examples. One from Gwalpada. Now we are giving so much of emphasis on disaster risk reduction as a part of the SDG. And then we find that in Gwalpada, there are small canals for irrigation and there are bamboo plantations on both sides of the canals. This is to help preventing soil erosion and also overflow of water from the canals. Then building construction in Kashmir. When I was the director of Manav Sangrahalaya Bhopal, I had brought a house from Kashmir. It is from the Jammu region, closer to Jammu, which was resistant to earthquake. Large pieces of wood or timber are implanted into the masonry walls as horizontal runners in the tuck system. They call it tuck system of house construction. This system tolerates devastating earthquakes in this region. And I hope this still exists. Professor Pandey can probably confirm that it was brought from all the way from Kashmir and put on the premises of Manav Sangrahalaya Bhopal. Then Rajasthan. Many of us have visited Rajasthan, or some of us might be the inhabitants of the district of Rajasthan, states of Rajasthan, particularly in the bordering areas of Rajasthan, like Jaisalmer, Badmer, etc., high desert regions. We find the wind velocity is very high and also very hot. So holes in the houses are kept to a minimum in order to decrease heat input and to protect against sandstorms. To build the roof, the local people in Rajasthan, bordering Pakistan, native jowar crops, dried stalks and byproducts are tied and woven together. Cow dung mixed with the soil to make the basic building material to keep the house cool during summer. So these are some of the symbolic kind of knowledge that the people have, and these fit into our sustainable development goals. This I will I'll say the late realization. The second paragraph I'm reading out, on the 22nd session of the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues in 2023, the Secretary General himself said, I quote, indigenous peoples hold many of the solutions to the climate crisis. And they are the guardians of the world's biodiversity. The so-called green economy is not a new concept for indigenous people. It is a way of life stretching back millennia. We have so much to learn from their wisdom, knowledge, leadership, experience, and example. Unquote. And therefore, I have termed it as late realization by the United Nations. I will come to the almost end. There are 2 more slides. How to weave indigenous knowledge, or why to weave indigenous knowledge, and what lessons we get from the field into the sustainable development goals. Number 1, indigenous knowledge offers time-tested, context-specific solutions rooted in a holistic understanding of the environment, community, and culture. Therefore, indigenous knowledge must be integrated with the development discourse. This conforms to the following development goals 10, 13, and 15. Knowledge production should be understood from a transdisciplinary framework, giving due emphasis on scientific as well as local for problem solving. Development planning has to be ecocentric with an emphasis on people's worldviews in harmony with nature. Conforms to many sustainable development goals. Development planning has to be participatory, context-specific, inclusive, grounded, and accountable as a tool of empowerment, conforming to the SDGs 5, 10, 16, and so on. And development has to be understood holistically with an implicit connection between environment, culture, and spirituality. So therefore, there is a need for weaving indigenous knowledge into the SDGs to make it successful. My final slide will be how to do that. Only 3 or 4 solutions, there are hundreds of them. First of all, let us recognize indigenous knowledge as a credible source of knowledge. So far, we have not recognized, and as an anthropologist, I have a strong conviction that it has to be recognized. Leveraging indigenous knowledge with relevant technology to make it more productive. This should be, as I said, a complementarity between science and indigenous knowledge. Collaborating with communities in development planning of all kinds. We are not doing it thinking that they're ignorant, they're uneducated, and so on, which is not true. Including indigenous knowledge in educational curricula at various levels. If I ask a Santal boy about the flora and fauna around his village or her village, probably he or she cannot answer. So it has to be included in the educational curricula. Let the student be taught about or made aware about what is the nature around them, environment around them. Promoting quality research in indigenous knowledge and its effectiveness in development. Less said is better. Millions of dollars are being invested on research, but then without or devoid of quality. Many of us are in different boards and examiners, and we know the quality of research output that we get. And creating database at local, regional, national, and international levels for preserving indigenous knowledge for the posterity. So this is a kind of, I would say, loud thinking, but then at some point of time, we have to think something. And this is my thinking about integrating or weaving indigenous knowledge into the narratives of sustainable development goals. Friends, I'm immensely grateful to Anthropos India Foundation and its founder, Professor Sunita Reddy, and the entire team, to all of you for hearing this presentation. I think it has become a little longer. So I'm extremely sorry, but then probably there was some kind of excitement to present something, and I did. And now I think the platform is Professor Sunita Reddy's as coordinator.
Thank you so much, sir. We are very fortunate to listen to your immensely informative and very insightful lecture. It's our pleasure that we could hear you. It was not a long lecture, though we didn't even realize that it's already an hour. And we learned a lot with your lecture, which covered all the sustainable development goals, giving examples of varied nature right from the field. I mean, with your experience, are also bringing out a lot of writings by anthropologists. So we are very thankful to you, sir, despite your being in US, getting up early and giving this talk. It was very, very informative and insightful. I would like to now invite my other senior colleagues who are in the audience, and we'll be happy to have your comments and feedback. Any one of you can unmute and then speak. We have Professor Shalina Mehta ma'am, Professor Anil Kumar, Dr. Neeta Mawar, Professor P.C. Joshi, Professor Gregory, and there are many more who have joined for this lecture. Thank you so much, sir. Once again, thank you. Yes, so I'm just leaving it to any one of you to unmute and share your thoughts.
May I come in?
Yes, sir, please.
First of all, I think, yeah. First of all, I would like to congratulate Professor Misra for this excellent lecture that he delivered, especially highlighting the role of indigenous knowledge. Now, at one point of time, he used a term which is very dear to me. It is mycophilic. And I just want to enlighten the group that mycophilic is a term which was used by Levi-Strauss and there was a book review that Levi-Strauss made, and it appeared in Structural Anthropology. And in that book review, it is called Mushroom and Culture. And Levi-Strauss actually identified cultures as two types: mycophilic cultures, cultures where people love mushrooms, and mycophobic cultures, cultures where people hate mushrooms. So this actually reminds me of a very important paper, and I would actually recommend my fellow anthropology colleagues, those who have not read, that they should consult the structural anthropology and read Levi-Strauss this mushroom and culture paper. Secondly, about the anthropological criticism of development and sustainable development, I think I personally feel that anthropologists perhaps have not been very vocal, and the whole discourse has been not a mainstream discourse as far as anthropologists are concerned. I'm glad that Mishra ji highlighted and it brought to our notice. I think there is a need, at least for Indian context of India, that we should highlight, we should find out what are the loopholes in SDG implementations, because if it is 12%, it is 12% for India as well. So I think this is the right time when I think anthropologists together should, come together and actually make a critique of why the SDGs are not successful. And I think we have some valid points to raise. This is only my request to this learned group. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Professor Joshi. Wonderful insights and your feedback. Would like to request other colleagues to share their thoughts. We have a few comments in the comment box. Dr. Neeta Mawar has given very comprehensive relation of indigenous knowledge and sustainable development goals from anthropological perspectives, opens new areas for research with critical thinking and great talk. Dr. Anil Sukumaran has also given wonderful comment. Thank you, Professor K.K. Misra. The presentation is outstanding as ever, brimming with information. You have not just capsuled a lot of examples addressing all 17 SDGs, but connected scientific facts connected with IKS practiced knowingly or unknowingly by the natives. And SDGs were the new wine in old bottle of MDGs. We are making sluggish progress on big agendas, thus postponing actions. Thank you for your effort. You are brave to air the truth. We are lagging behind to achieve SDG targets. Thanks a lot for today's presentation. Great learning. Thank you, Sukumaran. And we have comments from Abha. Excellent presentation, great learning piece with new perspective. G.V. Krishna, again, it's AK being integrated into ASG frameworks in order to meet SDGs. Very informative lecture, sir, by Swapna Sarita and then Kimshi and also Professor Gregory. It's high time the indigenous knowledge assumes the prime spot in realization of SDGs. Abha Mishra, Srijan Mishra, Bamdev, Dr. Neeta Mawar, G.V. Krishna, all of them gave their comments, sir. G.V. Krishna says, with climate change becoming a major concern across the globe, it's imperative that countries, more specifically, India needs to adopt IK to achieve our net zero goals. Then Anuradha, May, Mahio, all of them have given their compliments and comments. Thank you all. Yes.
Can I say?
Please go ahead, Dr. Mohammed.
It's always pleasure, in fact, and with following Professor Misra, very with deep insights. I think I should thank him for giving such a wonderful lecture. I'm hearing it after a long time, I think after decades. In fact, to share with the audience one experience in line with what Professor Misra sir was raising with regard to how the replications and the replicative models and the top-down models have been failed. I was a part of a World Bank project which I was attending in Anantapur district in Andhra Pradesh. There, the government of Andhra Pradesh issued cows, jersey cows. So I was part of empowerment program for the women. But it was hardly realized that Anantapur district was a drought-prone district, and it is hardly the cows and the cattle will get any fodder except for 2-3 months. So the women suffered heavily with due to lack of fodder for them. and thus the empowerment program or self-help group program was failed. And as such, as Professor Misra sir raised, if anthropological overtones are included in the projects, development schemes, then it will be wonderful and the development will be reaching to the intended people. So once again, I thank Professor Misra sir for giving such a wonderful lecture, and I should congratulate Professor Sunita Reddy also for organizing such a wonderful lecture.
Thank you, Professor Mohammed.
Thank you, Mohammed. Thank you so much. Would like to have your comments, Professor Gregory.
Thank you, Professor Misra ji. Hope I am audible, right?
Yes, yes.
It was an excellent presentation. Particularly, you were able to combine the field insights with the Sustainable Development Goals. I'm wondering to what extent the governments and the United Nations take seriously into consideration the indigenous knowledge system. Because the time is nearing, to 2030, and we are far behind achieving the goals. But I think the policies need to be revised and incorporated. The indigenous knowledge has to come take the prime spot in achieving these goals. And I think anthropologists should play a very constructive and proactive role in this. I'm sure we need to take some concrete actions. I don't know how we have to, we need to plan out. And we need to impress upon the governments, particularly Indian governments and the state governments. Probably what we can do is the documentation should be very, pakka. In that level, we can really contribute. Documenting the indigenous knowledge, corresponding to the Sustainable Development Goals, as Professor Misra ji has clearly made it in his lecture. Thank you very much. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Professor Gregory. So, would you like to respond, or we?
There is nothing to really respond, but only I would like to address to my colleagues, those who are teachers, probably to include indigenous knowledge as a part of the teaching curriculum. I'm saying from the school level onwards. And then second thing is that probably we have to do a little more effort in channelizing our research in the field of indigenous knowledge more and more. And indigenous knowledge also integrating with development. So therefore, this is an appeal to the teacher colleagues. And of course, there are administrators. It is their cup of tea, and it's not my cup of tea, so I can't really advise them. But then probably if somebody can carry this message to the planners, sometimes we are also, some of us are the members of the Planning Commission or the Niti Ayog, and then we have to do our bit in those kinds of meetings or in other kinds of ministries where we are members. Many of us are members at some point of time, and probably we can play our role as a part of the implementing agency or the planning agency and bring in indigenous knowledge. So,
thank you so much.
That would be the kind of
I just have a suggestion.
Something to say? Yes, please go ahead, Nitaji.
Dr. Neeta?
Yeah. I would just, your very informative talk, Dr. Misra, is really open ways how we could take up most things in future. And one of the things that just occurred to me is, like you suggested about teaching, and how we're taking up research projects, combined in this topic, indigenous knowledge and SDG, and where we can document with actual facts rather than terms of 17% only have really carried out, how we're taking up one particular SDG goal and then see how it works. And I think if we have in many universities, I'm sure we can get good funds out of this. We can definitely get funds and we can do big projects. I mean, when I say it should be very collaborative projects with, multidimensional aspects and comprehensive projects. And I'm sure anthropologists could give in a lot of inputs into research through these projects. So I think probably you have opened ideas. That's why I said, these things would be translated into straightaway research projects and then research programs itself. So maybe a multidimensional and multi-university, multi-site studies could be taken up so that, we can come up with a very useful information from our country. See, this is where it has gone. And that would be the best documentation that we could probably achieve.
Thank you
Yes.
so much, Dr. Neil.
Sometimes, ma'am, actually, just 1 second. Ma'am, actually, I'm shattered by looking at the reports, some of the reports by some of the researchers and funded by, it goes from everybody's pocket, from our taxpayers' money. And then very devastating. There is nothing in those reports. The name could be indigenous knowledge, but inside is nothing. So those kinds of things are happening. And I think wherever we are, we have to do our bit.
As field anthropologists, we can give very good, useful data, I think. That was my...
Oops.
Thank you so much, Dr. Neeta, for that wonderful suggestion. I think as...
May I come in, Sunita, for a moment?
Yes, ma'am. I was just saying that we all can join hands and work together in putting proposals and working together. So that was my take.
That would be great, yeah.
Yeah, ma'am. Shalina, ma'am.
Congratulations, Professor Misra. The best thing to do is to namaskar, enjoy your stay there. Sir, let's send a copy of this paper to Planning Commission and to Niti Aayog. No, our problem is we are not sharing. I've never been a fan of SDG, and I don't think so